Well, things just keep getting more intense with the Daily Wire. I really don't understand why Ben Shapiro is continuing to go on this apologia tour where he's going on Piers Morgan, Megyn Kelly, and many other shows to proclaim to the world that the Daily Wire did, in fact, not fire Candace Owens over her opinions, over saying Christ is king, for her criticisms of foreign policy in particular and how it relates to Israel. I'm starting to get the methinks doth protest too much vibe from all of this. Then Candace Owens seems to have had enough. And she said, okay, well, now I'm going to speak because Ben Shapiro keeps going out there. They had clearly signed some sort of non-disparagement, or NDA or some sort of thing like that. And it looks like Candace Owens is getting pretty pissed off that Ben keeps going out there. Now, again, I will say, as I always do, I don't know what happened behind the scenes. There's very valid arguments that Candace Owens leaving Daily Wire was right around the 3-year mark, which could have been the length of her contract. There are valid arguments that maybe she saw how much they offered to pay Steven Crowder and thought she was worth more. And it seems like she started acting up ever since going to bat for the Daily Wire against Steven Crowder. I don't know. We don't know. Candace hasn't said. And to be totally frank, it's none of our business, really, unless you're a paid subscriber at Daily Wire. If you're a paid subscriber at Daily Wire, you might want to know. But Ben went on Megyn Kelly. Now, again, last week he went on Piers Morgan and refused to answer the question. Okay. Now he goes on Megyn Kelly and has this. Now, look, he may have had these scheduled ahead of time, all that kind of stuff. By the way, if you're enjoying this show, please always leave a like on the video. If you haven't yet, subscribe or follow down below. It means a lot to me. It helps a ton. And remember, I have a live show every weekday at 5:30 Eastern on Rumble, or I also have Quartercast on YouTube, which are always linked in the pinned comment and the description these days. I'd love for you to join. It's a completely different show. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I have Melanie Mack. Wednesdays, I have Styx Hexenhammer every week now, so I'd love for you to tune in. Now, let's look at this.
Into a debate about whether the Daily Wire is pro-free speech. The accusation is you are until it comes to Israel. How do you respond?
We have a wide variety of positions on Israel right now inside the Daily Wire. Matt Walsh, obviously, is another one of the hosts at the Daily Wire. He and I wildly disagree about what America's Israel policy should be. Matt is much more isolationist. He basically believes the United States has no real interests in the Middle East.
By the way, big agree. I've had my disagreements with Matt Walsh before, like about video games or whatever the case may be. Big agree with Matt Walsh about, hey, until all of our problems are fixed here in America, let's not meddle in foreign policy. I think even if you are someone who doesn't live in America that watches my videos, you probably feel the same about your own country, right? I can't think of a single country that couldn't use a little more TLC, whether it's, with homeless problems or, public works or bridges or roads or, there's a million things that could be fixed. I don't think any country is perfect, so maybe we shouldn't be, intervening in these other countries. But anyway, he's referring to, Matt Walsh put out a video, I think a day or two ago, where he basically directly disagreed with Jeremy Boring and Ben Shapiro's opinion that really any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic, which is absurd.
And thus, the United States should not be providing material support to anyone, including the state of Israel. The Daily Wire is a publisher, not a platform. I would never call for anyone to be ousted from an actual platform, X, YouTube. Even people who are, I think, absolutely horrific human beings, I've never called for any of them to be ousted. In fact, I've called for them to have their accounts restored if they've been banned.
So let me be clear what Ben Shapiro is saying here. He's talking about, we are a publisher, not a platform. Where have you heard this language before? Well, with Section 230, right? Where the government protects platforms from legal repercussions based on the actions of users who publish things on a platform. If I upload something heinous to Facebook, Facebook can't get sued. Or same with X, YouTube, and whatever. Now we know that basically all these platforms outside of perhaps Rumble, have you followed me on Rumble yet? I hope that you do. They don't act really like platforms. They act like publishers, meaning They boost and deboost opinions they disagree with or they agree with. They carry water for the Democrats, like on YouTube and Twitter used to, Instagram, Facebook. Basically, every major Silicon Valley website promotes Democratic content, pro-Democrat content, shadow bans, anything else. He's saying, look, the Daily Wire, we tell people what to say, right? We tell people what is acceptable to be said at our outlet because we are a publisher, not a platform. The Daily Wire is not YouTube. We have rules, is what he's saying. And that's entirely fine. You know, as critical as I've been, I think that's a fine rule to say. Like, hey, you can say whatever you want on your own platform, but when you're publishing videos for the Daily Wire, if you say something heinous or that hurts the company, we have something to say about that. Now, I think people's valid criticism of that is, why is it only about this one topic, right? This one topic you're not allowed to, push up against.
That's not the same thing when it comes to publishers. Publishers obviously have to decide what sort of things they wish to pay for the publication of, and when it comes to hosts and publishers, parting ways, obviously there'll be a non-meeting of the minds. That's pretty much all I can say on that.
Again, most of what he's saying is fine. I think as a I don't pay anybody to. Well, I guess the Publica, we do have. Yeah, have you been to the Publica.com, by the way? Great news team that Sydney Watson and I run. Generally, again, from a business perspective, I don't disagree with him. I think what people are pointing out is, why is it just this one thing? And what I'm curious of, why are you on Megyn Kelly, Piers Morgan, Glenn Greenwald? 3 different shows in 3 days, all like running damage control. I assume that Daily Wire is losing subscribers. I assume. And now, so he goes on Glenn Greenwald's The System Update. These people, if I'm being totally honest, they make me sick. They cannot think in any form of principles whatsoever. Glenn Greenwald eviscerates Ben Shapiro's impressively hypocritical justification for real Candace Owens' Daily Wire departure.
But here's the real meat of the matter when Ben Shapiro tries to explain what line it is that Candace Owens crossed.
And so when it comes...
I'm sorry, I misspoke. This is Glenn Greenwald commentating on Ben Shapiro's appearance on, I forgot, another show, The Rubin Report, where he went to run interference as well.
Comes to the host on the Daily Wire, obviously everyone is able to say what they want. Nobody ever comes to me and says you can't say X, because again, there's a parting of the...
We know this.
One of the biggest media controversies in the last 5 years was that the New York Times had published an op-ed by Tom Cotton during the Black Lives Matter movement, in which Tom Cotton advocated that the U.S. military should be deployed onto the streets of the United States to crush the Black Lives Matter movement on the grounds that that movement had become systemically violent.
It did.
And many, many journalists inside the New York Times said that is outside of our Overton window, as Ben Shapiro put it. Overton window. Ben Shapiro is really not using that phrase correctly. The Overton window really is a theory that says you want to create as broad of a range of political views as possible. You want to widen the Overton window if you're a radical, so that views that have been deemed way far outside of the mainstream get closer and closer to the mainstream. Ben Shapiro, when he says Overton window, is saying there's a range of views
we're willing to pay for
that I may not agree with, but these are the acceptable views.
Correct.
Within our media outlet. And you can't cross the line here and you can't cross the line here, because then you're outside of the Overton window. And he's saying we as a media outlet have every right to set the boundaries of what we consider to be acceptable views. And if you go outside of those boundaries, we have the right to fire you, and free speech is not implicated by that. Okay, so if that's the case, why was there so much uproar when the New York Times decided to fire 2 of its editors for publishing Tom Cotton's op-ed that called for the deployment of American military to quell the Black Lives Matter movement? The New York Times editors were simply saying what Ben Shapiro was saying. We have an Overton window, and that op-ed was outside of our Overton window. We don't want to be associated with views that call for the U.S. military to crush a social justice movement against racism. That was their perspective. And we don't want to be associated with that view. We're not saying these editors should be put in prison. We're not saying Tom Cotton should be put in prison for that view. We just don't want to host this view.
Right.
We don't want to subsidize editors who would publish this sort of thing. I don't know a single person on the right who defended the New York Times there. Just like I don't know of a single person on the right who defended NBC News from getting rid of Ronna McDaniel. It was presented as a kind of crisis in free discourse that within major media outlets, you cannot express certain political views that are within the mainstream without getting fired. And yet here is Ben Shapiro trying to justify why Candace Owens is gone from the Daily Wire, not because of a business reason.
Right.
Outside of Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens is the biggest name at the Daily Wire. She has the biggest audience.
Guaranteed. Yeah.
They're probably comparable in terms of the number of people who watch their show, who listen to their podcast. Maybe Ben Shapiro's bigger.
He is a
But
little
Candace Owens is in that same category. There's nobody else at the Daily Wire who competes with Candace Owens. I guess Justin Peterson if you want, but it's the point I'm making is that Candace Owens is a huge
Jordan Peterson
draw.
Yeah.
It's not for that business reason. But what is true is that the Daily Wire was started with investment from a right-wing billionaire, millions of dollars.
Yes.
A pro-Israel billionaire.
Yes.
And
keep going.
Ben Shapiro is essentially saying that we have limits on what you can say about Israel, and Candace Owens went outside of them. Now, if you're comfortable with that and you think that's fine to fire journalists because they express political views outside of some line, then how can you criticize NBC News for doing the same with Ronna McDaniel or the New York Times for doing the same when deciding they don't want any Trump supporters there?
I'll leave it there. You should watch Glenn's entire video on it if you want, a better take. But that I think is a very, very fair position to have. And then, of course, here we go. Candace Owens sees it and says, Ben, we agreed not to talk about this, but you are very much going on a public tour right now, pretending not to talk about it. While you are very much talking about it, would you like me to do the same? I 100% agree with Candace Owens, and I'm not a big Candace Owens fan. And you can see I just canceled. You see this? I just canceled my All Access. I think, why is he continuing to go out on this tour? Now, people are pointing out, hey, you went on Tucker Carlson and talked about it, which is also fair. But that was before she was fired. So it'll be interesting to see, how many more places Ben Shapiro goes to talk about how they totally didn't fire Candace Owens because of her opinions that they disagreed with. It'll be interesting to see how this shakes up. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you leave a like on it. Hopefully I'll see you tonight, 5:30 Eastern for the live stream. We'll talk to you again real soon.